Our next speaker is the global spokesperson and Australian coordinator for Cloakcoin, an untraceable cryptocurrency launched in June 2014. He's also co-founder of Sydney-based Prytech venture studio, Privacy Express. Please welcome Joshua Marriage. Thank you, Joshua. Make you move stuff around there. Thank you, loyal subject.
All right. Hey, everyone. We've come a long way. Are we all good with the presentation? Yep, good to go. All right, so who here was around for the Dominic Frisby talk just before? Yeah, so I just realised he covered the same topic as me, so I've had to change my presentation last minute. He talked about privacy. I'm going to talk about privacy. A little bit of classic rivalry between Australia and the Poms, the Brits. So yeah, is anyone familiar with this face? Yeah, it's Zuckerberg, but he's been Zucker-punched. He's been probably a major stalwart in terms of what we're seeing in the mainstream media around privacy of late. He's been beat up in front of Congress, and that's how he's looking at the moment. But he's classically said things in the past to the effect of privacy is dead. He says that it's a thing of the past. But ironically, he actually spent $30 million to purchase the properties surrounding his Palo Alto home. And to me, that sounds a little bit like a veil of privacy. So enough bashing Zuckerberg until a little bit later in this presentation. Right now, it's time for a little bit of bribery. So we're actually doing a quick competition where I'm going to give away 100 cloak coins. So if you've got an iPhone, open up your camera app, point it at the QR code. If it doesn't work, type in the address into your browser. It'll just go to a tweet, and it's as simple as just retweeting and following 2 accounts, and I'll draw the winner after my presentation. So I'll give you a little bit of time. That's just for me to remember the rest of the content, because I had to make it up just a second ago because of Dominic and whatnot. All right. So it's hushmoney.club/win. Sorry, too slow? I'll go back. All right. That should be enough. It was just to keep everyone quiet and bums on seats, and hopefully everyone stays till the end now. Okay, so this here is me. This is before I got a piercing here. I got this to show everyone that I feel bullish on the crypto markets. Funnily enough, my surname is actually Marriage, and I'm in fact divorced, so I've been meaning to change that, but I'll get around to it eventually. This is a stand-up comedy conference, isn't it? Might be in the wrong place. Anyway, so yeah, Marriage, just like Mr. Marriage, holy matrimony. The day that I got married, it was the marriage, but that soon came to an end on the honeymoon. We actually split up. And that's where my privacy story actually begins. As you can probably imagine, it was a rough time. It's back in 2014. And I was sort of careered off the edge of a cliff, let's say. I was doing a lot of irresponsible things involving the dark web and facial hair. So this is me. That's 9 months after my divorce. So this is in 2015. I was sort of growing that to hide behind it. It was my own veil of privacy. I had a bit of a whirlwind tour around Europe and partaking in different substances off the dark web, and had a bit of an introduction to crypto, but had no idea that it was, going to be the future of money and all this sort of stuff. So I was basically stuck in a position where I had a drug problem. I had my life sort of falling apart in front of me, and I had this awful beard, so it was time to shave it off. Now, the thing is, with this beard came another life that I lived. I was a bit of an internet celebrity, which was weird. I was known as Beardspo, which was short for beard inspiration. God knows why. But basically, I started getting stalked online, and it was purely because I'd been oversharing. I was putting too much information out on the web, and I was taking for granted that I'd be fine, no big deal. So we'll get to this in a second, but basically, after spending a lot of time trying to clean up my image online, I was trying to raise money to start a business and do all these sorts of things. I was getting in contact with the likes of Facebook, which I had back then, and a bunch of different websites to try and get some images removed, because that mug of mine actually ended up superimposed on some fetish porn. And if no one believes me, there's a documentary on ABC in Australia called Hair Fetish, and it's about this story. But it's a government-funded TV station, so the story's a bit G-rated. They surprised me at the end with a naked barber, which was weird. But anyway, Sydney, Australia. So while trying to deal with these tech giants, let's call them unicorns, I was starting to realise that the user is not the customer. So you might have heard Dominic say earlier, you are the product. I like to be a little more draconian and sort of say the user is not the customer. The customer is the advertiser on these platforms, and they're essentially selling your personal data to these companies in the form of advertising. Is anyone familiar with this diagram or what it might be? No idea? That's good, because it makes this a bit more effective. So this is a panopticon. It's architectural design for the perfect prison by Jeremy Bentham, who created utilitarianism. It's a circular structure, and in that structure there's all the cells in the block, and in the middle there's an all-seeing eye or a watchtower, and basically there's no nook or cranny to hide. And the reason for the relevance of this is it's the same concept that's used by large social media platforms. It's almost their software architecture, if you think about it. If you were to compare Facebook, all of the users are in the cell blocks and their software is in the watchtower, and they're just scooping up everything they can about you. And that's the same with a lot of big tech unicorns. Unless they're crypto ones, of course, then they're fine. In terms of the concept of this in our everyday lives, it's also comparable to the fact that, like I mentioned before, the user is not the customer. The user is a data source. So while you're producing all this data, you're somewhat a virtual inmate, a prisoner in your social media life. Who here actually has Facebook? Yeah, it's very common. Like, I had it until not that long ago, a couple of years ago maybe. And I'm not going to continue bashing it, but I do want people to think about why these platforms are free and maybe what some of the ramifications are. Because when they're collecting all this sort of information about you, it's not just what you tell them, it's all the dots that they connect in the background. There's thousands of data sources and can really paint a picture of your identity through these methods of surveillance. And the other thing is, there's a reason that in these prisons, the inmates are being observed all the time, because observation changes behaviour, and even though the prison system is a complete joke, they think, the powers that be think that that makes people better and sends them back into the community, hoping that they're going to behave and not reoffend. Okay, so speaking of Facebook again, we'll round back to them because this is quite relevant. Who's familiar with the Cambridge Analytica scandal? Yeah, that's good. So it was basically a gross breach of privacy in the sense that Cambridge Analytica were using lots of personal data from Facebook to help influence things like elections. Now, what's interesting about this graph is in grey, that's the Google search trends for Cambridge Analytica scandal, and then in black is the Facebook stock price. So when the news broke, you see the first spike in Google searches. That's the initial breaking of the news, and then the masses catch on, and the next spike is when it goes viral. You see this with a lot of things on the web. And what's interesting is when all the hoo-ha was going on about this scandal, it didn't affect the Facebook price. The Facebook stock price kept climbing. And this is the concept of why privacy is so hard for people to really get a grasp on its value, because the cost of privacy is often not realised until it's already been paid. So the reason that there's this delay in the stock price reacting to the scandal itself is the fact that investors only found out about advertisers boycotting the platform when the quarterly report comes around. And then, of course, the stock price dropped. $120 billion in market value lost in a day, and it's a record on stock markets in history. So, like I mentioned, this is a nice Banksy artwork. It's still relevant, even though we don't use phone booths. We're all sort of walking around in a phone booth with that device in our pocket. And what I mentioned before about privacy and the cost not being realised until it's already been paid, that's because something that's really inconvenient is a data breach. So speaking of data breaches, there's a website called breachlevelindex.com. Has anyone ever been to that site before? Okay, so they keep like a running tally of reported data breaches because there's certain laws around reporting these kinds of things. And in the first half of 2018, there were 3.4 billion data records compromised that were reported. 83% of those pertain to identity theft, and only 2.2% of those cases were considered secure breaches where encryption rendered the stolen data useless. So these tech giants, these unicorns that are running around with our personal data, they're not necessarily protecting it, and that's of grave concern. So 98% of the time, the data that's being stolen is essentially money to the bad actors that are taking it and leveraging it for their own purpose. So I like to say that if we're going to start a movement, we want to start a data revolution, or data revolution, sorry, I dip in and out of accents. We need to really consider that personal data belongs to the people. I don't want that to sound socialist. I want it to sound personal. Because the word personal data, even though people don't see it as being or holding much value, it's actually a really valuable asset, and yet we're throwing it around like it's a dirty commodity. And that's purely because these powers that be and large tech firms have sort of trained us into believing that. Personal data belongs to the person. That person is you, the individual. You never question that with your personal hygiene. So why do we question it with things like personal data? I hope Zuckerberg's not got any disciples here. So the reason that this is relevant, and in terms of our personal data being taken, exploited, repackaged, resold over and over again, the reason it's of grave concern is because technology is accelerating so quickly. So if you think about religion, a few years ago, Facebook passed 2.2 billion users. Took the Holy Book, what took the Holy Book 2,000 years took Facebook 12. Now that's a lot of converts and a lot of people following along with their story. You might think that that's irrelevant, but all of the content that you consume through a place like Facebook is censored. They're showing you what they want you to see. They're showing you the things that keep you happy, keep you in line. There's similar parallels with some other forms of indoctrination. I know that Jeff Berwick from Dollar Vigilante likes to talk about indoctrination, like our mandated government practices such as the schooling system and all those sorts of things that have their problems. So we talk about privacy. There's a lot of buzzwords that get around in the cryptocurrency industry. Blockchain is cool, crypto is awesome, but my favorite's decentralization and privacy. And the reason I like decentralization is it's this idea of power to the people. It really rings true with something like anarchism, and I guess that's why I'm here today, luckily enough. If you ask someone in the street, you should try this experiment. Just say to someone, what's the meaning of privacy? You get so many different answers, and that's because it's such a wide-arching problem that seeps into all parts of our lives. But I like to say that it's just the ability to express oneself selectively. And that seems pretty important when you think about things like autonomy and your dignity and just the general human condition. Anyone here doesn't care about privacy at all? Okay, good, because if there was anyone, they'd probably be naked, so it's good that everyone's got clothes on. Okay, so Edward Snowden, everyone would know who he is. He famously said that saying that you don't care about your right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care for free speech because you have nothing to say. So the quick survey showed that everyone cares about privacy. That's really good. That's great for myself and projects like mine and the 5 minutes that we have left. And the reason that I bring up someone like Snowden is he's a primary example of, blowing the whistle and starting a movement. He's quite an inspirational person for us if we're going to start this data revolution. Now, for me personally, I sort of live by this bit of a philosophy of death before disclosure. It's quite dramatised, I know. I haven't actually died when I've disclosed information before, but it's a nice slogan for a t-shirt. Basically, I live my life in a way where I make these choices. I really exercise that freedom of choice. It's similar to everyone here who's interested in anarchism and voluntarism and liberty and all those things. So I sort of practice this in my day-to-day by using a bunch of different tools. So I have multiple pseudo-identities that I use for different things. I often get multiple discounts from large retail chains by using fake identities time and time again. And I like to say that it's privacy pursuits for fun and profit. It's a really fun way to learn about this stuff and learn about the value of your data. And rather than treating it like a dirty commodity and letting it be traded from under you, you can really capture that and treat it like a valuable asset. So there's even projects like some guys in the UK, tapmydata.com. They've got an app that just allows you to request your data back from certain companies, and then you actually earn incentives and rewards for doing so. The other one that everyone should get is MySudo. It's an Australian startup. They've created basically cryptographically secured email and identity and phone numbers that you can generate and have these pseudonyms on your phone. At the end of the presentation, I'll have another link to a website I've built especially for everyone here, just so you can look at all the resources that I have or have not talked about. All right, so I'm not a salesy person. I'm not going to pitch anything to you. I might pitch this to Dominic Frisby after hearing about his cypherpunk holdings. So Cloakcoin, it's a project I've been involved with for a long time. We launched back in June 2014, and funnily enough, a lot of people here probably haven't heard of us. Has anyone heard of us? Oh, that's better than I thought. The guys will be proud, doing my job. So basically, we're a pure proof-of-stake cryptocurrency. We achieve untraceable payments through an off-blockchain mixing solution that's embedded into our system called Enigma. And basically, we're all about privacy and enabling true transaction freedom. And I don't think I have too long left, do I? Maybe 1 minute? Okay. I'll just quickly play as this video and then you can go to the site. It'll save the time. Well, it doesn't look like it's going to work anyway. So if everyone wanted to head over to hushmoney.club, like I mentioned, I've just set up a site there. Couple of points of difference that I want to mention about Cloakcoin compared to some other privacy coins. A feature that we're really proud of is an auditable total money supply. If privacy is important and store of value is important, the total supply is a really important number in that equation to figure out what an individual coin is worth. So I recommend checking us out. Most of our team's based in Munich in Germany, available on all the major exchanges like Binance and Bittrex, and we're in fact one of the first projects on Bittrex back in the day. So that's it from me. Just want to remind everyone, pay with crypto, not your privacy, and let's strive for true digital cash. Let's get this opportunity to maintain our privacy, and in the spirit of the event, peace, love, and anarchy to everyone. Thank you.
Anarchapulco, it's so hype, I'm trying to tell ya. This the event of the year and best vacation ever. Ron Potter, Jeffrey Tucker, just to name a few. Get your tickets, you don't want to miss it. You should roll through, talking politics to health and self-improvement to investing. So many things, not one thing. Learn how to live life unchained, yeah. 4 days vibing on the beach, time to connect. All about growth, way more than a conference. This is Anarchapulco, yeah. Let's go.
You ain't seen nothing yet.